Hi, I'm Mark and welcome to another lesson with Master Everyday English. In today's lesson, we're going to work a little bit with that fast English. What do we mean by fast English? We mean the English that normally, when spoken naturally, sounds very, very fast. It's almost like the words are getting squashed together. We're going to focus in today on the future tense, and specifically we're going to look at the be going to future. We use the be going to future when we're talking about our plans. If it's something we're pretty sure we want to do in the future, or maybe it's an intention. These are the ways we normally use the be going to future. Before we jump into the listening, let's just do a quick grammar review of the be going to future. Let's make a simple present tense sentence. For example, I buy shirts in Tampa. I live in Tampa, so I buy shirts in Tampa. That's present tense. That means I do that as part of my routine. Maybe I do it regularly. Now, if we compare the future tense, if I think about something I plan to do or I intend to do in the future, I need to say, I am going to buy a shirt in Tampa. And that tells you that I'm thinking about some time in the future. Not regularly, not every day, in the future. Because we have the be going to future, we have the verb to be. And remember, the verb to be changes with each person. So I am, you are, he or she is, it is, we are, you are, and they are. So for example, she takes a taxi to work. If it's in the future, it's something she plans to do. She is going to take a taxi to work. We, that's you and me together, we learn English. If we plan to do it together in the future, we are going to learn English. With that simple sentence form, let's think about how it sounds in fast English. So let's go back to our original sentence. I'm going to buy a shirt in Tampa. If we think about how that sounds in fast English, remember we said that's going to get squashed down together, and it sounds like this. I'm going to buy a shirt in Tampa. And so you hear that going to is changing to I'm gonna. So that's what we're focusing on today, is that going to specifically changing to gonna. Remember we said we have that change. When we use the be verb, it changes with the person. I am, you are. So let's listen to how that sounds in fast English with going to. I'm gonna, you're gonna, he's gonna, she's gonna, it's gonna, we're gonna, you're gonna, they're gonna. So now let's think about how it sounds in the negative. If we go back to our original sentence, I buy a shirt in Tampa. If we think about the future negative with going to, it sounds like this. I'm not going to buy a shirt in Tampa. I'm not going to buy a shirt in Tampa. And once again, because we have that be verb, remember that we have to change with the person. So, I'm not going to buy a shirt in Tampa. If we remember our previous example, she's not going to take a taxi. We're not going to learn English. So a sentence like, I'm not going to buy a shirt in Tampa changes to, I'm not gonna buy a shirt in Tampa. A sentence like, she's not going to take a taxi changes to, she's not gonna take a taxi. She's not gonna take a taxi. A sentence like, we're not going to learn English changes to, we're not gonna learn English. We're not gonna learn English. We are gonna learn English, but for this example, we're not gonna learn English. I want to introduce you also to the idea of be in the negative in a very sort of like slang or casual or informal way. Oftentimes, when people speak very casually, very informally, they'll change the I'm not going to I ain't gonna. I ain't gonna. Remember, this is very casual, very informal, so maybe you won't hear it as much as I'm not gonna, but you'll hear it. I ain't gonna. So the interesting thing about ain't is it doesn't change with the person. So it's I ain't, you ain't, he ain't, she ain't, it ain't, we ain't, you ain't, they ain't. I ain't gonna buy my shirts in Tampa. Sounds very casual, right? Very informal. She ain't. She ain't gonna take a taxi. She ain't gonna take a taxi. Let's get some listening practice to everyday situations where you very often hear that gonna for going to. So let's do a quick example together. Listen to the sentence and then decide, do you hear the fast gonna? And it can also be negative, maybe ain't gonna or not gonna. The first situation, you're at the bar, you're waiting for the bartender, and then she comes over and she says,
I'm gonna be with you in just a minute. I'm gonna be with you in just a minute. I'm gonna be with you in just a minute.
The second situation, you're sitting in a restaurant and then your server comes over with your food and she says,
We have your order ready. 1 burger and a chicken salad. We have your order ready. 1 burger and a chicken salad. We have your order ready. 1 burger and a chicken salad.
You're at the airport, you're going through security, and one of the TSA officers, the people who work in the airport, says to you,
You're gonna need to put your laptop in a separate tray. You're gonna need to put your laptop in a separate tray. You're gonna need to put your laptop in a separate tray.
You take your car to the mechanic. You give the mechanic your keys, and the mechanic says,
Your car's gonna be ready around 5. Your car's gonna be ready around 5. Your car's gonna be ready around 5.
If you're enjoying this lesson, go check out my channel, Master Everyday English. There are lots of other lessons all about life and work in the United States. The be going to future, it needs a little practice. And one of the parts that you really need to get some practice at is asking questions and listening to questions using be going to for the future. If we think about questions and question forms, there are two different types of question form that we use every day. The first example is the yes/no question form. And what we mean by that is simply a question that when someone asks you or you ask someone, the answer is yes or no. If we think about that same question in the future, we change to, are you going to buy a shirt in Tampa? Well, how does that sound in fast English? Are you going to buy a shirt in Tampa? That changes to, are you going to buy a shirt in Tampa? Are you going to buy a shirt in Tampa? So that are you going to gets squashed all the way down to, are you going to buy? Are you going to buy a shirt in Tampa? Are you going to buy a shirt in Tampa? Is she going to take a taxi? Is she going to take a taxi? Is she going to take a taxi? Notice how that be verb at the start of these questions almost completely disappears. It just becomes a little sort of sound before the person. She gonna? She gonna? We gonna? We gonna? You gonna? You gonna? The other type of question form that we commonly use is the kind of WH question form. And by WH question form, we mean the what, where, when, why, who, how. We say WH because most of these question words begin with WH. A good example of a question, what are you going to buy in Tampa? In fast English, that sounds like, what are you going to buy in Tampa? What are you going to buy in Tampa? So all of that, what are you going to, changes to, what are you gonna? What are you going to buy? What are you going to buy in Tampa? Because we have the be verb, it changes with the person. Where is she going to take a taxi? Changes to, where's she gonna? Where's she gonna take? Where's she gonna take a taxi? Another example, how are you going to learn English? Change that to fast English. How you gonna? How you gonna learn? How you gonna learn English? Now let's get some practice listening to those yes/no questions and the WH questions too. In this practice activity, I want you to listen carefully to people asking questions in everyday English situations. Can you understand what they're asking you? After a few seconds, I'll write the question on the screen and you can check. Let's do an example together. Imagine you go to an English school and you want to register. You go into the office and the secretary there says,
Are you going to register today? Are you going to register today?
You go to a restaurant, you have a beautiful meal, and then the server comes to you at the end of the meal and she says,
How are you going to pay this evening? Cash or card? How are you going to pay this evening? Cash or card? How are you going to pay this evening? Cash or card?
You're with a few friends, you've gone to a bar, you've ordered some drinks, and the bartender says to you,
Are we going to be paying together or separately? Are we going to be paying together or separately? Are we going to be paying together or separately?
You go to a coffee shop. You order some food, you order some coffee, and the barista, the person working there, says to you,
Is it going to be eaten or takeout? Is it going to be eaten or takeout? Is it going to be eaten or takeout?
Good job, well done. I know this is difficult, right? This is very tricky to listen to this kind of English. It takes practice. So if you do need to, go back, do some of these exercises again. It's really good listening practice for you. Okay, we have one last activity to do together. What I want you to do is try now to produce some of these fast English sentences and questions using be going to for the future. I am going to write some sentences and questions on the screen, and I want you to try and think, how do you pronounce those sentences and questions in fast English? Thinking back to what we studied, the gonna, ain't gonna, are you gonna, is she gonna, what are you gonna, when are you gonna, using that gonna in fast English. Let's do one example together. So, look at this sentence. How do we say that in fast English? What are you going to do tonight? What are you going to do tonight?
You're going to have to wait a little longer. You're going to have to wait a little longer. They're not going to give you a discount today. They're not going to give you a discount today. What are you going to order for dessert? What are you going to order for dessert?
We're almost finished, but one last thing I want you to know is a very common mistake that I hear from my students when they're learning how to make this change from sort of standard English into fast English, especially with this be going to for the future. A very common mistake is that people add in the to. You don't need it in fast English. So what you'll very often hear is a sentence like this. I'm gonna to buy a shirt in Tampa. And that sounds a little strange. I'm gonna to buy a shirt in Tampa. It should just be, I'm gonna buy a shirt in Tampa. That's it for today. Thank you for joining me. I hope this lesson is useful if you're studying English and you're finding that fast English difficult to understand. If you enjoy the lesson, please don't forget to give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and click to subscribe.